you know, that is so beautifully framed, so well-intentioned, if put into practice and implementation, would create a wonderful society for us. You know, the UK doesn't have a constitution, but India does. And Dr. Ambedkar was able to frame that because he was able to educate himself abroad. You know, he was, unlike a lot of the well-to-do or people who were connected in India of his time in the early 20th century, he decided to travel to America to study and not England. And that was a very significant move. You know, he was exposed to the civil rights movement there, he was exposed to a different way of thinking. And then when he came to England, he was able to expand his thinking and his education here as well, which he could take back and feed into the work that he had to feed into, whether it was around table discussions in the 1930s, you know, when he was being called a stooge for even sitting with the British because the Congress, you know, were abandoning this. And the annihilation of caste that he wrote, you know, which is a magnificent marker for us, actually. We should remember 1936. Now, Dr. Ambedkar knew that religion is not the only guardian of morality, because I think people would tell you that it is, but it's not. And he knew that it wasn't. And he knew that failing self-responsibility and humanism, elected parliamentarians, no matter which country they lived in, wherever they are, they have a duty to uphold and create laws that progress morality and justice and not retard it. And that is why we have a bookmark for the 14th of April in our hearts, and it's very significant for us. And here in the UK, you know, like Eugene said and Siddharth has said recently, you know, we have laws that provide equality of treatment and of equality and opportunity and justice. And we live in a society that quite rightly prides itself on justice. And most of the time people get justice in this country. And that is why in April 2013, Parliament agreed, after listening to the voice of victims of caste-based discrimination, that the government will outlaw caste-based discrimination. And 4 years on, that still hasn't happened. And we know that caste-based discrimination, harassment, untouchability is just like other forms of discrimination and harassment in this country, whether it's race or gender or based on disability or sexual orientation and so on. So when you have the same sort of similarities that is occurring here in a population, a South Asian population, that according to the census amounts to over 4 million people, how can you ignore that this is happening? And the government and Parliament, particularly in the Lords, didn't ignore it. You know, they said that we must legislate. And what we've had is a government that's delayed it. And today's speech, and the one that I'll make tomorrow, which is a bit fuller than this, you know, is something that I had hoped that I wouldn't have to deliver. I hoped that this government would have implemented the law by now, and that we wouldn't have had the options that they have presented as part of the consultation. And we have a lot of work to do. You know, there have been a lot of people who've been in the movement for caste law discrimination. You know, you mentioned the men's names. There are a lot of women who've been working on this too. And I've been working on this since 2000. You know, writing briefing notes, lobbying Parliament, lobbying Lords, lobbying MPs at every opportunity. Because what you need is good communication as well as education to be able to influence those people who can influence others and make a difference. And recently, you know, just to tell you what we're up against, you know, so we have this consultation, we've got to respond to it by the 17th, and there's no point in going in a lot of detail into this, but it is a defining consultation, and we have to take it very seriously, and we're all working together as groups to formulate some sort of guidance so we can support people who need to feed back into this consultation by the 17th of July. In a recently published report by the National Council of Hindu Temples in the UK, incidentally, they're going to publish and distribute over 12,000 copies of this report, which I've read, which is something that I find absolutely horrifying. And basically, it calls on a number of people. I think Eugene mentioned this report, and maybe Siddharth Shikant also did as well. It attacks a number of people who've been asking for the law to protect victims against caste discrimination. And it also calls out to the Dalits, in a very patronizing way. And let me read what it says, in this, as it calls out. It says, "The Church of Empire drove your ancestors from their homes and traders and put them in chains and destroyed your spirit simply because your ancestors resisted the tyrannical British colonial laws. The colonial Anglicans then declared your whole community as criminals by birth." This is what it's telling us. So when you think about, these words, and you wonder, why is it, that they fail to ignore the Rohit Vamilers of India, and they ignore the thrashing, the public flogging of the 4 youths who were skinning a cow, that was broadcast all over the world, and that they ignore the plight of victims of caste-based discrimination here in the UK, that the government has, that Parliament has heard the voice of, and the UN has heard the voice of. Is it white British people that are doing those things to those people that I've talked about? The Rohit Vamilers, those people who've been flogged? No. It's the South Asian diaspora here, and it's the Indians in India. That is what we're up against. So perhaps they may need to revisit that. When they talk about the British colonials that have done this to India, then they might need to think about the Guru Granth Sahib, the Sikh religion being around for over 500 years, mentions caste discrimination and the atrocities of caste. It was there before the British turned up, and what we have are these falsehoods, this false propaganda. And if Dr. Ambedkar was alive today, he would say, what? Are these people deluded? Do we believe them? Genuinely? Are we going to sit here and listen to this rubbish? We wouldn't. And we have to be Ambedkar-like and challenge these people for what they are. So just as 1936 and the annihilation of caste was a defining year and a defining period in the history of the fight to undo the caste system and untouchability, 2017 will be the defining year in this country about who stands on the side of justice and equality when it comes to legal redress for victims of caste-based discrimination in the UK. And that is why Dr. Ambedkar's relevance is so strong today. I would like to end, I've spoken for far too long, as I always do, but I'm always encouraged by our Ambedkarite friends, all over the world, because you're so committed to Dr. Ambedkar. And why not? There is no reason why we shouldn't be, and why we shouldn't encourage even more people. And this is why I went to a meeting. One of the reasons why I'm late is I've been to a number of meetings today, and one of them was at the High Commission this morning, and it was to do with the Dr. Ambedkar House. I don't know if you've been to it, Mr. Deputy Mayor, but you must go to it. It's in Chalk Farm, and the Federation of Ambedkarites and Buddhist Organizations' proposal to buy this house and turn it into a memorial, a visitor center, as a resource center, is finally coming to fruition. The house is being developed for the purpose that it was bought, and that has been as a result of this, this vigorous campaign for us. So if we can do, the Ambedkar House, we can get equality law into the UK here, and we have the opportunity to do it, and we must all work together. Thank you very much. Jai Bhim.